Hi folks, this video is going to explain Newton's third law of motion, which is a bit more straightforward than the first law because it can be summarised by saying for every action there's an equal and opposite reaction. Basically what that means is if object 1 was to exert a force on object 2, object 2 would then produce an equal and opposite force on object 1. It tells us that forces occur in pairs, and there's lots of different examples that we can look at to explain this. So here you can see that a person is pushing their finger against the top of a drawing pin. Now the reason that the person would experience pain from this is because as their finger presses on the end of the drawing pin, and you can see that force going to the right, the force of the finger acting on the pin going to the right, what happens is the drawing pin then does the exact same thing but in the opposite direction. And what you notice here is the arrows representing the forces gradually getting larger the more that the person presses their finger onto the drawing pin. It shows us that forces occur in pairs because when one force is produced, there's an equal and opposite force produced at the same time. Another example is objects that have gravitational forces. So we know that the Earth has got a gravitational force. We also know that the Moon has got a gravitational force. Now even although Earth's gravitational force is greater than the Moon's gravitational force, and obviously we know the Moon orbits the Earth, there's also a force acting the opposite way. The Earth is pulling the Moon towards it with its gravitational force, but at the same time the Moon is pulling the Earth towards it with its gravitational force. We know this is a real thing because of the movement of the tides. The tides are caused by the gravitational pull of the Moon acting on the Earth. So while Earth is pulling the Moon towards it with its gravitational force, the Moon is pulling the Earth towards it using its gravitational force. Other examples we can look at involve rocket launches. So the reason a rocket is able to launch is because of Newton's third law. When a rocket's on the launch pad and the engines are switched on, it produces the force, obviously, that's going to take the rocket off of the ground. The reason that's possible is because as the engines, when the engines are activated, they are going to cause lots of gas molecules to be forced downwards and out of the exhaust, if you like. As the gas is forced downwards, at the same time as it's being forced downwards, these gas molecules will push back up against the rocket. So we get another pair of forces. The rocket engines will force the gas molecules downwards. As that's happening, the gas molecules will push back up onto the rocket. Now, because of the size of the engine force, there will be millions and billions of gas molecules forced downwards. If all of those push back up on the rocket at the same time, that's going to also create a very large force, and a force large enough to cause the rocket to start to lift off the ground. And we can see it's described here on the right hand side. The rocket's pushing the exhaust gases downwards out of the engine with a huge force. These gases push back on the rocket with the exact same force because it's a Newton pair. The forces are equal and opposite. And then if the force on the rocket is large enough to overcome the weight of the rocket, that's when it will begin to lift off the ground. So Newton's third law tells us that forces occur in pairs, and for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction.